Sports Radio 98.9 FM and 1350 WOYK. You can find them on our website at 989WOYK.com. You have all the list of events that are coming up on WOYK there as well. By the way, check out our new WOYK app in your app store. Yeah, go get that. That's a must. Equip yourself, and the WOYK YouTube later on today will have what you're looking at right now, but it'll have it then. And it is our YouTube channel, WOYK, our podcast. And so you go there. You can email us, WOYK@YorkRevolution.com. And finally, you can text our show. Well, almost finally. You can text our show at 833-478-4729. That's 833-478-4729. And finally, if you go to Facebook, just search Gary Sutton Show. That'll come up. And you'll see our question there today, which is, what are the three main things you have to have for any Super Bowl party? I'll be anxious to see what you put up there. I'll probably share some of that tomorrow or maybe even later on today. We have like one more segment after this. But right now, I want to bring in Joel Sears, our community watchdog. I call him that for lack of a better term now. He's been the former president of the York County Taxpayers Council. He was on the York Suburban School Board. He ran for office in the 95th Legislative District. He's been all over. He's experienced a lot of things. He's a businessman. So he comes from a lot of different perspectives. But one of the things that has been a pet of his for a long time has been education. And he's with us here this morning to tell us a little bit about school choice. You know, we're in a country, we all like choices. Why not school choice? We still have a debate about that. Joel, good morning. Welcome to the show. How are you?
Good morning, Gary. I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm good. Why is school choice such a debate? You know, we say, well, you know, you should have a choice of where you want your kid to be educated, and maybe you're stuck in a bad school somewhere, and we'd like to get them out there and get a good education for them. I mean, what's more important than that in our lives today? What's more important, a product, than having kids come out who are learning and who are well suited for getting ready for society?
Well, you can understand the importance, Gary, of education. We talk about the fundamental period of growth for most of our kids, and that takes place during the elementary, middle, and high school years. We want them to be, at, say, the age of 18, competent to go into the workforce, the military, or on to higher education, whatever makes sense to them, and be productive citizens. And we, as a nation, have decided that the best way to do that, and we've done this for 100 years or longer, is through a system of public education. Over the years, even before the term school choice was around, there were parents who understood and felt that their kids really would do better in another environment. The parochial school movement was big, and it still is. There are private schools all over the country, which is big. And there are now all these other alternatives that are available, including publicly funded charters, publicly funded cybers, homeschool, teaching pods, you name it.
Right.
There was an explosion of this stuff that took place during COVID because parents were frustrated. The kids were at home, they were not learning, they were socially isolated, and they got creative, which is what people do. Well, in his first couple weeks in office, the president has issued a flurry of executive orders, one of which deals with school choice. And I've looked it over a couple times and think, well, what this really amounts to is the federal government reallocating through this order, if and when it's actually done. We'll say tens of billions of dollars. I'm not sure what the exact amount is or if it's even been allocated. At one point, I thought there was like a $10 billion commitment. But the idea was to put block grants into the hands of the states and then let them create programs, or let's say supplement programs such as these education savings accounts that would allow families to tap into up to $10,000 or so federal money.
Right.
Or private religious homeschool teaching pods, you name it, as they would choose. The controversy always comes when you start pitting public education unions against mom and dad. There should be no pitting of unions against mom and dad.
No, it's supposed to be in league together, working together, right?
Yeah, and that to me seems to be the pushback almost every time we talk about school choice at any level. Well, here in Pennsylvania, we have a couple programs that have been in place for a long time, and they mimic federal programs. I shouldn't say federal, but other programs that are available around the country. One of those is called the EITC, which is the Educational Improvement Tax Credit. That's a big deal. And the other one that we have in Pennsylvania is called an Opportunity Scholarship Tax Credit. Mm-hmm. Both of those allocate money to educational institutions or alternatives through education improvement organizations and or museums or other sorts of bodies that allow businesses to contribute money to these organizations in lieu of taxes.
Right.
They can get tax credits up to 90% of their contribution if they commit to do this for a couple of years or longer. So it's a very, very easy way for people to, let's say businesses in particular, because it's not available to individuals.
It's been a very, very good program so far, too, because you have people who are doing that on their own. They're not being forced by the government to do that. They're rather giving back and getting some tax breaks as a result of that, but still giving back to the educational system.
Well, it's giving back directly. That's correct, Gary. It's an earmarked amount of money. Some people are upset about that because it's seen as a way to get around the constitutional prohibition for using public funds to finance religious schools. Because that is possible through the EITC and the OSTC.
Right.
Well, at the federal level or even the state level, then the question is, how do you distribute the money? How do you determine who's qualified and who gets it? I know our segments are always much shorter than the amount of information available. Let me just jump to something that I found very interesting.
Go ahead.
We have school choice in Pennsylvania. It may not be as widely used as some of the school choice advocates would want, but we do have it. So I took a look at the city of York and I thought, what are the choices that are available for no cost to parents today?
Mm-hmm.
This wouldn't require any reallocation of any money. Well, there are 8 K-8 schools in the city of York. And the reason I picked them is because I can look at performance as well as cost.
Okay.
And when I take a look at those schools, and then I say, well, what are the charter school options that are available, assuming that there's capacity?
Mm-hmm.
There's Lincoln Charter, and there's the York Academy Regional Charter School. Those are the 2 brick-and-mortar choices.
Okay.
And then I picked a couple of the more widely known cyber schools to see what was going on there, and that would be Agora, Commonwealth, and Pennsylvania Cyber. So these are what parents can select today, this kind of education, without having to write a check or without having to go into debt to finance private education. Then I said, well, what are they getting for that? So this is the choice. If you're in one of the city schools, your choice in terms of its school performance, and you heard Aaron talk today about the national report card, 8th grade performance, which I like because that's what these folks generally are. That's the last time we actually get to measure these proficiencies at 8th grade. So in the city, English language proficiency ranges from 7.7% on the low end to about 33% on the high end. So even if you could move your child from one catchment area to another, that would be your choice if you're looking at it in terms of output. On the math side, 4 of the city schools' proficiency in 8th grade math was 0. The highest was 19.4, and that was the Edgar Foss Smith STEAM Academy, 19.4.
Wow.
So those are the in-city system choices if you're looking at it in terms of proficiency. The charter schools, Lincoln Charter School, 29% proficient in English, 0 in math. York Academy Regional, 37% in English and 9.6 in math. Now understand that the York Academy Regional Charter School was supposed to be the savior for the city. And this is not the kind of performance I think most folks expected after all the time that place has been in business.
Yeah, so if you have a choice, what you're saying here is your choices are somewhat limited because of the results that you're getting, which are not the results that are making things better when you get that choice, right?
Exactly, and if you're choosing based, and it's only one factor, obviously. You could be choosing based on safety or the friendliness of the teachers or the location. Is it closer to your home? You might pick Lincoln Charter because it's in your neighborhood. There are a number of reasons why people put their kids in brick-and-mortar charters.
Right.
But I would think that the primary reason is the academics.
Is there a lack of mobility here that might come into play as I examine this a little bit, Joel? Is that part of it, or is that part of many factors right here?
It's one of many, but the mobility, if you're thinking about how do I get my kid from home to the school?
Right.
If you go to if you go to a charter school, you get transportation.
Okay, so there you go. So you have that.
Now the other, let's talk about the 3 cybers. The transportation is get out of bed and walk over to the other side of your room to your desk if you have one.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Agora, which is one of the larger, has proficiency levels in math of 31%, So that's right along the line of these others that we talked about, close to the state average. Math proficiency 3.8. Commonwealth Charter, which is headquartered up in Harrisburg, and it's one of the biggest in the state now, 44.6 in English, 10.8 in math. Pennsylvania Cyber, which has a fund balance of over $180 million, 32.8 in English, 10.3 in math. These choices, Gary, I'm going to get crude here. It's like walking into a butcher shop and looking at all the choices on the table and all the meat's rotten.
Yeah. Yeah. So what you're saying is they're not working right now. So now you say, okay, what about going out to the public education system? Do we need to cross some boundaries here? Are we crossing boundaries? If so, what do we need to do to make that more streamlined? I just threw about 15 questions at you right there, all one, but take your choice.
Well, when you talk about crossing boundaries, as an example, Pennsylvania school districts are allowed to accept tuition students, but many don't. And even if they did, and when I say tuition students, I mean literally that. If you want your child, let's say,
you're paying the freight.
You get to pay a tuition.
Right.
And that's a number that's required to be published every year, follows a formula. The problem is that if there's no capacity in that school, they don't have to take you. It's not a just walk in and sit down situation. So it's a one-way choice. I'd like to go there, but there may not be capacity to do that.
So round this up for me at the end and tell me where we are right now and where we need to be in the last 2 minutes.
I think we're at the beginning, middle, and end of the conversation. It's just like a hamster wheel. We go around and around and around with this discussion, Gary, and we don't seem to be able to settle it.
Is there a way for it to happen? Is there a way for a choice to be made where it's going to be better, or do we just have to somehow improve our public schools? Especially when we look at that report card we looked at today that was taken nationally for 2024.
Well, I guess the answer is yes to all of the above. The national report card has been static for the last 20 years, static to down a little bit. It's not dropping dramatically, but there's just, with all the efforts and all the different studies and all the different university programs to try to figure out what's going on, we don't seem to be able to push those test scores up. So my sense on that, Gary, is that if you really want to push them up, you've got to start peeling the onion back and doing things that are uncomfortable. And since most of our educational investment is public education, the pain's really going to be primarily borne by the public ed system. We need to make sure, for example, that teachers know how to teach their subject matter. And for them to not feel insufficient or degraded or something like that if they discover, horror of horrors, that they've been teaching kids to read the wrong way, using the wrong methodology.
Well,
it's a very painful conversation.
And at a time when we're seeing a rush right now to get back to efficiency and accountability, do you sense that, and again, the president has talked about getting rid of the federal education department and giving this back to the states. That's maybe something we can talk about in the future here as we go forward with this and see if that is a better way of doing things than having the education department controlled by the federal government, which, by the way, does not have any power to do that according to the 10th Amendment. So we'll see. Joel, great work on this. Thank you so much. I know next week we're going to be talking about the governor's budget, which just came out here the other day, and we'll be getting into some of that and breaking that down next week for people as well, right?
Okay. Talk to you then, Gary.
Have a great one. Thanks so much. Joel Sears with us here this morning as he takes things apart like nobody else. We'll take a break. We'll come back with more here on the Gary Sutton Show on WOYK. It's 8:48.